Hey everybody, welcome to another Mixing with Swigs. This time we're going to be doing something a little different, which is going to be really cool. This video is part of a series of mixing an EP that I've been commissioned by Colby T to do. Now Colby T is an awesome VGMer who's basically working on a few tracks for an EP, and I'll be mixing, mastering, reamping, and basically producing the album. So you're going to be listening to not my work, but his, and he's done a fantastic job here, as you can see. But we're just going to take a look at each of these songs as I mix them, and hopefully some of these ideas we can share and figure out, and maybe this will be a little educational too if you like my style. If you're interested in having me mix one of your projects or EPs or albums, I do have a hire sheet and a Patreon tier where I both teach production or I just produce your music. So do check those out, and let's just hop to it. So we're going to be looking at a song called Stone Tower Temple from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the N64. It's a fantastic song, and it's got like a lot of ethereal ethnic side to it. So I'm actually done mixing, and this is going to be like a shorter video just to copy some presets or do just observe kind of how I have it mixed and maybe learn a little bit about what I did already. So let's listen just a little bit. And I have mastering turned off. Okay, and already you can kind of tell it's not, mastered in my usual way. I haven't put on all the effects, and I'm actually going to show you how that sounds, just that first bit, with some of these mastered chains. And again, this isn't quite like going to be the usual mixing with Swigs where I start from scratch, so I do apologize if that's what you were hoping for. Okay, so I hope that gave you like a good example of the kind of sound we're working with. It's not quite, blistering, dark, low-tuned metal, but it's got some edgy, hard rock to it. I like to kind of consider it amongst the lines of like Altered Bridge, and some of the influences in the arrangement kind of play towards how I'm going to mix this, or how I already mixed it, rather. So what I kind of want to do in this video, just because we're going over rather than approaching and guessworking all the times, I kind of want to show you just in order usually what I did and why. So as per tradition, I'm gonna turn off my master bus here. I'll increase the volume so you can hear a little better. And basically what we're working with is Easy Drummer 2 tracks, the popular drum sampler that have been rendered out for me just as a WAV file for each of the kit microphones. So we have kick drum, we have a snare, we have stereo overhead. We're not using hi-hats, but I just kept it part of the template. And we have a stereo track for toms. Normally, I would have the individual toms, but this is perfectly fine too. And we actually have a tambourine, and I just kind of figured, tambourines are sometimes part of the kit. Let's see how that sounds. So the song starts out with the tambourine kit, and I just have that pan to the side, just for like a bit of a stereo effect with these toms. So now what we have going on in the kick drums here is my usual kind of EQ, just based on the sample I'm given. I kind of like to have some thump down here. I don't want too much boominess. So if you want to hear, it's got a little bit of the beater sound, and as 16 in Mono calls it, the spongy area almost. Just like I don't know how to describe it, but I like it. It just fills out a little better. And this is kind of unnecessary when you think about it. So let me kill that. But we're getting like a little bit of the reflections from the room, so I'm just going to turn that down. I should also explain, so these are the tracks I was given, but obviously we have a few more in here. So to begin, this is a simulated room microphone, and what I'm doing here is I'm using Reverb, which is an impulse loading program built into Reaper, and I love this. This is the best. This is the best reverb I could find, honestly. It's a little more CPU intensive, of course, but basically, I'm loading in a impulse response file, which, if you don't know, it's basically like if you've ever played with reverb, you know, sometimes you're in a big room and things sound one way, and if you're in a canyon or a church, things sound another way. So this is basically like an audio file that tells me, oh, this should sound like it was inside a, you know, a 4 o'clock 9-foot high microphone. So this basically is like a pretend room mic, not a Easy Drummer room mic. So this kind of sounds like we're in the studio, and you know, I compress it a little strong here. You know, we're getting like almost 7 dB of loss, but it just fills out this really thick filling so you can really hear it, kind of like it gives life. It sounds like we're listening to kind of like a live show, but not too much, and it really glues together samples. Otherwise they sound really separate and fake. So I have 2 of these going on, and the other one receives just the cymbals and the overhead. Sorry, the overhead and the hi-hats, and then I saturate it quite a bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look for an appropriate sort of reverb here, and I like using this Premises Studios one just because it tends to give me a response that's like kind of studio feely. So you get that nice bright sound, and we compress it so it kind of stays up there. We can give it a little less compression. But it's basically creating the brightness in our drums. So that's how the room mics are working. Now, apologies, I'm going out of my usual order. The snare here is kind of the same in a lot of my mixing with Swigs. I basically don't need too much of the low-end content, but I want to bring out some of the ring, and that I find is sitting here. And if we raise it, there's like that pop. Now if I've got this high shelf going on here as well, and that kind of brings out some of the ringing. And a lot of that it gives me the snappy feeling, and the sound is just really nice altogether. So, you know, the drums are kind of sitting pretty nicely that way, and the compression I use for snares kind of vary. I try not to over compress, but at the same time, so we're losing just a little bit of gain reduction. We're taking in like, I want to say -2 or 3 dB here, and the idea behind this is you know, a compressor is only going to let in so much volume. So you know, if the snare hits really hard, I want it to get that first impact. So that's why we have like this kind of slower attack, and then you know, once you've heard the impact, I don't want it to last too long, especially if we're getting you know, all these fills, 'cause then you get that dragging sound. So that's kind of how I'm getting the snare sound here, and of course I have some tape saturation here, and this is just trying to boost the ring of it a little bit. So I think this is okay. And all a tape saturator plugin will do is, you know, music is digital inside here. So every sound wave, if you zoom in close enough, is really just, oh, this is a bad idea. Okay. It's really just like, you know, it's a 1 or a 0, and it's a tape saturator will fill in with some sort of pseudo harmonic content. It'll just warm up the sound by filling in where the digital could not. And I think it's really important to explore that because, you know, it just massages the ears better if you're impacting it with a wave, not like a square. And it just sounds really good. Something sounds good, you know. That's all that matters. So this is the overheads, and all I do here is trim off a little bit of the bottom. Even that feels extreme. And the snare is kind of like trying to pop out here, as you can tell. So, you know, and then I just ease a little bit of this volume here so it's not, you know, killing on the ears, and we let in a little bit of volume for the leads and, you know, melodies. Now, again, because this series is, you know, oh, okay, so what I'm doing here with the toms, and we'll find like a good section here. So each tom microphone is attached to the, you know, the physical drum itself, and we're getting a lot of this resonating, boomy, shaky sound here. I don't want that to occupy the bass, so I'm actually kind of like trying to cut off where the bass guitar will sit and where the kicks will sit. And then these cuts are, of course, just, you know, trying to create some space, and the hollowness is kind of nice. And then, of course, you have like the stick sound, and that's kind of coming out better by raising here. And of course, last we have a little bit of extra reverb using the Verbiage plugin, which is kind of a cool evaluation plugin. And I'm actually under the impression that, you know, a little less width might be better. So it's just giving like a little bit more impact every time you hear the snare actually strike, and I think that's really, really cool. And you know, so that's what's going on there. Now, altogether, what's happening in the drum bus is, you know, just some basic EQ. I'm cutting away just like little spots, and I found that there wasn't quite enough kick drum resonance and tom resonance. So that's kind of what's going on here, and then we're trimming off like just the 2 highs and the 2 lows, and that's kind of what I like. Now what's going on here is, this is what's called parallel compression. Now some people will put it on a separate track, but using FabFilter Pro C lets me do it all in one plugin, so I kind of prefer that. And basically what we're doing is we're compressing the drums, and I'm basically trying to get it so every time we hear that snare hit, we lose just a little bit of reduction, so we get that nice compressy sound. So you can see it's only really striking down there, but we do have this like consistent compression going on. And it's quite a fast attack and release. And we have a good non-compressed level cutting in too. So we can kind of bring this up a little bit. Does feel a little bit more impactful and cleaner. So that's what's going on with the drums. Now, what I'd love to do is kind of explain a little bit of my logic here. So I'm going to go over the rhythm guitars. And I want to remind, of course, that since I'm using the Axe effects, some of these tones may not be quite achievable, exactly. You've got to play around with whatever you're given. But I believe bias effects is a fantastic alternative. So I'm going to pull up the tone that I used, and we can take a look at that. Just take a listen alone. So we have this very, I want to call it juicy sort of tone. It's got really rich high end. It's got a lot of gain, but it also has like some pretty good note definition. I believe this was done on an 8-string, which I've not quite worked with before. So what we've got going on in Colby Rhythm here is we have a light noise gate just to take off a little bit of the hiss. And I like having a second noise gate that just works a little bit tighter. And the ratio is at 2, and we have a threshold of 42. So just based on this guitar, we can have some spots where there's like little bits of gaps, but this song just does not have. It doesn't really let up, so we don't really get to experience that. But what I find important is if you allow more noise and you play more carefully, you create more natural sounding chords and natural sustain. So I really didn't want to lose that. I have this compressor turned off just because I felt that a chordy song like this doesn't need that aggression. I think it could breathe better. So we used the Friedmann Hbe V2 amp, and this amp is like, it's got such versatility that it doesn't necessarily feel like a shreddy amp at first, but the gain just breaks up really nicely at low volume, and then at high volume it just, it's very consistently crunchy. So what I did here was I had a very low input drive, 3, given this drive pedal, which is it's supposed to be an Ibanez tube screamer anyway, drive low, tone pretty high up, but I basically cranked it to where you're getting like a lot of this trebly sound, and things are really sitting well on the higher end, and it glues with the cymbals really nicely. And I have this depth turned up. Now this kind of gives, this is kind of like a resonance controller almost for the low end. So you get a little bit more boominess, which I think a lot of amp simulators don't always do well. But of course with the Axe effects, I'm just floored at how realistic it feels. You have like a little bit more presence here. And the cabinet I used was this Uber V with a V30 speaker, and we're using the 421 dynamic microphone here. It's getting like a really good picture of like the high end half of the guitar, which is good because when you look at my equalization here, we're cutting off all this content below 131 anyway. And if you see, all these cuts are made just to fit the leads because it's, such a juicy tone. Have 2 tracks reamped, I believe the same tone as well. Maybe like a cabinet change at most, but it's fantastically simple. And that's kind of what I did with these lead guitars. The only difference being that I applied this gentle curve, and then I tried to emphasize the this like little spot around the 600 to 1000 range, just because that's kind of like the vocal part of a guitar, and the melody guitars can sit really nicely if you mix them a little bit like vocals. The difference, of course, with lead guitars is I also had a compressor because there's a lot going on at once, and I just wanted a tiny bit of control. So I felt compelled to do that. And we have these sitting respectfully far away. Might set this at like minus 75. You always want your higher melody to sit a little louder. I think it's kind of like a sandwich to me. And you want the bread to kind of just be above the meat. We have going on here is kind of interesting. I'm actually using guitar rig because I couldn't find a tone in the Axe effects that would get, I don't want to say like a fake, maybe a synthetic sort of sound. So all we have really going on here is Valhalla Shimmer, which is a plugin that just creates beautiful delays. Fantastic one. And then we have guitar rig going, and then we have, you know, tapes. Oh. Here, let me explain this tone. So this is actually not in use, so I should get rid of that. So we have the Tube Screamer, we have the Van 51 amplifier, which is kind of like going for an old PV 6505 plus or 5150 amps. You know, just a lot of pre-gain, and it's kind of like you want it to feel very like pin-pricky, so, you know, it's played very lightly. And then I emphasize those mids because that's where the note comes in. We have this reflector, which is just another program that lets me load impulses inside a guitar rig, of course. So I'm using a Mesa Rectifier V30 cabinet and speaker. So that setup is really nice for me. Just a little bit of ducking down, and then delays for days, reverb. That's going on for each. We have that on each side. So now, of course, we're going to go over bass. So looking at bass, I was given the DI, of course, the direct line. So let's take a little listen to that. And what we're doing here is I'm kind of emphasizing places that I wish the, you know, the bass guitar control almost had, but otherwise I'm just dropping down a little bit of the subs. You know, I'm leaving in a lot of this because there's some good, nice harmonic content in the dry bass, and I want it to boom a little. Then I reamped it through the Axe effects, of course, using a Ampeg SVT bass head simulation, and this one has like this character about it. It's more body. You can see it sitting a little bit more here. I don't even have to worry about it getting too picky. And I do have a different compression going on here. I might actually bring this up a lot more. Just because I'm not too afraid of it getting too boomy. Now this is what's going on overall, so of course, you know, you can't just leave a bass once. Gotta try it twice. So this is my approach, and I've already seen a few other ways I like a little bit more with basses that I think sound a little better. So this is a reamped through, it's like 50% a bass amp, maybe 40% a bass amp, and then 50 or 60% a guitar amp, and it just sounds nasty. So this is all regular bass territory, and this is all blending in with the guitars. So that's what's going on there. And then I have a second EQ going on just to kill a little bit of some buzzing that I caught. And all together, it blends with the guitars. So this is another EQ that kind of just raises and heightens the shelf that I got from Molly Getgood, from Periphery's sort of tutorials, and I found it's really good because it's just emphasizing what I always wanted, and subtracting the areas where guitars will definitely cross over, you know, and like vocals and so on will cross over here. It's kind of like the logical choice to do here. And then there's a little bit of compression on top, and that's just, you know, to make sure nothing pops out. Oh. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the bass guitar overall, and when we listen together, it just blends in really nicely. Now, of course, I know I'm kind of like trying to speed through this because I have some here's what we did episode, and not much of a how do we take this project on, because it's already sort of done. And the last thing I was given was this wind sound effect, so I just did a nice little curve in there. But the other thing I did was I used this isotope ozone imager. You can use any imager you want, and I basically tried to stretch out the stereo image so that it would feel wider. And I did this because it's, you know, a sound effect and it's digital, but I've stopped using this for non-digital purposes. You know, and the reason why is just because it does create like a little bit of some weird sound conception. You know, it's like it feels falsely wide when you can just pan it that way. So that's going on, and then Valhalla Shimmer for a large delay, but you know, any stereo delay does the trick. And this is just to, you know, build up. I found it to be like sort of signature of myself now to never start a song with an impact unless there's some additional things going on. I have a little whoosh pack #1, just like some digital DJ anywhere or sample. But I find it really eases transitions. Now, the last thing that's really worth going over, of course, is reverb. So I'm receiving all of my lead guitars because I want them to all be coded in reverb to the same effect. So, and same with that synth in the beginning. Now I'm using reverb again, but this time I'm using an effect reverb I have from another collection. And all these things were completely free open source. So, you know, please take advantage of not having to pay for things, and then, you know, when people are selling things, you know, do the right thing and pay. But what I love about this Hall effect is now if you listen to all these leads, they sound, you know, just gorgeous and stretched out and less harsh. And you can even EQ these. I actually would recommend it, so I'm gonna do it like I said it would. Now I'm gonna attach a low shelf here to just gently. Now this is a lot of boomy content. But I just want it to be light, really like bright on the ears, and I'm actually gonna clean this reverb bus off. And I'm surprised I don't have a drum reverb going on. Oh, I do. Silly me. Alright. But I'm gonna do another low shelf here. Just kinda like brighten it up just ever so slightly. And maybe a little more. And we're getting this beautiful full mix that I just really like. And it's kind of thanks to the reverb. Now, what I'm doing with the drums here is I have a plate reverb, and this kind of reflects really fast. And, it has this different characteristic. So I just put this on the drum bus out of, you know, hey, what if I did this? But let's take a listen to it before and after. So this is without the plate, and with it. So it's just giving you that like extra wet sound. It feels a little larger, and I think that's really important, having a larger kind of sounding drum for something so mighty like this Stone Tower Temple cover. So let's take a look at what I'm doing on the master. Of course, I'm doing this preset that just really works for getting a brighter mix, a boomier mix off the start. So you know, as per Guru Nali over here, I found this to be a very useful preset to have. I also have recreated it in re-EQ, the Reaper equalization tool. So you know, it's not something exclusive to these more convenient looking plugins. Now the next thing I'm doing, of course, is I'm compressing, and I've noticed that I've compressed a lot less than many productions, so I'm just going to take a look at this multi-band compression. On the bass end, we've got some pretty tight bass control going on. Let's take a listen. So we're losing like 3 dB. And here, we're actually losing quite a little bit. That's okay. And again, this is like our frequency spectrum. I know I'm like stopping to explain a lot of things because I've done it so many times, but I really don't want to leave you guys with questions that I could have answered here. So these are 2 bands, or like little sections of our song in the frequency. So this is, you know, going to be the first one. It's got all the bass to it, and this one has like all of our meat because it's our low mids and our mids just the frequencies that kind of like speak the song and have this melody. And then of course we have, you know, these higher mids and some of the trebular sort of area, the trebles, and this tends to be a little more dangerous to mess with, so I try to compress it even less as I go up. See, we're not losing much. Compression is really good to get that professional sound and control all the frequencies, but it can be dangerous. So let's take a look at this FabFilter Saturn plugin. You can use any sort of tape saturator plugin you want. Ferric TDS is the freeware tape saturator that I, you know, have found myself to enjoy the most. But you know, of course, I really do enjoy using this one. So what I like about FabFilter Saturn, and I should actually change this to 0, is you can divide up the frequencies and almost like re-equalize some of the songs using tape saturation to fill in the gaps of where your song needs more frequencies. And just to like emphasize that, I'm going to go some extremes so you know there's changes. So all in all, I didn't take, you know, how long this mixing with Swigs video was to mix it, but you know, these kind of mixes, once you've done 1 or 2, you should really start finding what aspects of it you really trust yourself to enjoy and which ones you don't. You know, some people really like presets, you know, as do I, even though I tweak everything. But you know, familiarize yourself with the process. The last thing I would do is add a limiter, and what I like to do with a limiter, of course, is I'll set the output, or you know, the limit to be, you know, -2 dBFS, which is, you know, to compare a lot of YouTube musicians and, you know, just music in general tends to crank it really high. You don't want to start clipping, so I'll raise the gain until I'm, you know, near there. So let's just click this on. I'm going to drop this to nothing. I'll show you what I do. And that's actually all there is to it. I'm just checking to make sure I'm not clipping in here. I'm trying to hit the -2 like I said, but you know, you don't want rectangles for songs. You want things to sound quiet at some times and loud at some times, and that way you have what's called a dynamic mix. Something that, you know, when you have moments of silence, the next part, when you get louder again, feels much more impactful. So it's very important to not crush your song with compression and you know, boominess if you're after something that's more dynamic. If you're not, of course, then by all means, let's crush it 100 dB. But that's not quite what I'm after here. Now, as a result of being commissioned to do this as a full mastering process, I actually will be turning off the limiter when I do this. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it's just going to be so much easier to export this full song and then do a limiter all at once. So I'm going to take this song into a new project, and then I'm going to limit all of the songs for this EP together. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go over some of the next songs. We have one from Super Mario 64 that I just did today. We have a Sonic Adventure 2 song, Final Rush. That one I should upload next. But I really hope this has been kind of informative, educational for anyone watching. And again, if you guys are interested in having me produce one of your songs or even one of your albums or EPs, do check out my Patreon tier or my higher Swigs URL and commission sheet to send me an email. I'd be happy to listen to what you have to say, and I think the prices are pretty affordable, and I'd love to take a crack at any cool projects you guys might have. All right, thanks so much.